Okay, so today, in the previous class, we have discussed regarding to the issues which are pertaining regarding to the the variables and their scope and their livability and everything has been discussed in the previous class itself. And today, we'd like to go ahead and discuss some more very important points regarding to the functions. So today's topic will be agenda will be seems like this. So default parameters or default arguments of the functions. Why default arguments and what are the importance of default arguments in terms of any programming language? This is the agenda today and the top-down approach also. We would like to discuss something about top-down approach also. So let me open this notepad. Let us see. We have a function. We have a specific function in Python, namely namely range. Range. So this particular function does have three parameters actually. First one is start value. Second one is final value. First one is final value, and second one is starting value, and third one is the step count. Step COUN, step count. Actually, these three parameters are there in a range function. This particular function is being used by us for our convenience in the previous classes. So, what is the importance of this particular function? Let me give you some clarity. Then we'll go ahead and explain regarding to this default parameters here. So here we maybe use this particular function something like this. So range range of we would like to define this particular thing in two models. Number one is something like this, and number two will be something like this also. Start value could be available somewhere else in the beginning also. So both will be eligible here. Starting value, comma final value, both will be eligible. Range of maybe use something like this, range of 10. So here, as far as the original definition of range function or range method will be taken 1, 2, and 3. Three different types of values have been taken into consideration here. But we have been supplied only single parameter. Yes, it could be worked out. It could be working. There is no problem at all. Let me go ahead and open the Python and let us have a look about this particular thing. So we open a small program for you, then we'd like to check out that particular thing here. So for I in range of 10, for example, range of 10, let me print out the values of I here. So print so the value of I. That's all. That is my program. That's all. Nothing else I'd like to perform here. Let me save this particular program for a while. It could be always generated the values right away from 0 to the 10 values. So let us see. So I have been submitted here only range of values as my Python program. Okay, I have submitted only single parameter here. You could observe this particular program here. I have been submitted only one parameter. But actually, how many number of parameters are required here? Actually, so three parameters are required. Three parameters are required here. So if you submit only one parameter, then what about two more parameters or two more arguments here? What about these two arguments here? So by default, remember, by default, these two parameters will be assigned some values. What are the values which could be gets assigned here? So the values will be start value and step count will be by default. These are assigned to like this here. So start value could be always assigned to 0. So that is why you got the 0 here. Look at this. You got 0. Why? The start value has been assigned with 0. And the step count will be by default. It has been assigned to 1. By default, these values have been assigned to 1 here. So that is why 0 plus 1 plus 1, I mean 1 plus 1, 2 plus 1, 3 plus 1, and so on. So it has been produced something like this here. Okay. So by default, start value and step count values have been submitted something like this: 0 start value as 0, and step count is wait for a while, please. So this particular value, so step count will be assigned to 0, and start value will be equal to 0 here. So therefore, if you produce only one parameter, default values for start value is equal to 0, and the default value for step count is equal to 1. Therefore, the range function will be produces some value something like this here. Okay. And if you are supposed to specify something like this, let me say start value could be, I would like to change from, so 0 to, let me say start value could be, let me say some 2 to 10, and let me omit so-called step count here. So let me execute this particular problem for you for a while. So here start value could be 2 comma 10 here. 2 comma 10, I'd like to specify and execute this particular program here. Look at the start value has been overwritten. Overwritten. Previously, by default, start value must be 0, and the step count must be 1 here. So it has been overwritten. So since you have been supplied your own value here, so therefore start value will be always overwritten by 2, because user has been submitted here. Okay. Then let me change one more point here. So let us consider. So the start value will be, let me take at this particular point of view here. Range will be, so let me say 2, and the start value will be 2, and the final value will be, let me consider, that is some 40. And then let me give one more parameter here, that is step count, that is 2. So here we have used 3 different types of parameters. How many number of parameters are expected by range? All these 3 parameters have been given here in this particular case. So look at this. Look at this. First usage of this range will be only a range of 10. Range of 10 in the sense default values of start value and step count 0 and 1 can be directly used by the default parameters. And here start value will be equal to 2 and the final value equal to 10. Then what about step count? Step count 1 will be taken by the default parameter or default argument over here. And here we have given start value at our own and the final value at our own, and the step count also be given at our own. So that, therefore, all those parameters have been utilized by you. Therefore, it could be overwritten whatever the values you have given here. Okay. So let me produce some value here. T and D is equal to some space, single space. Let me take something like this because it has been produced line by line. So I'd like to restrict to producing the values at the same line. So that is why it has been. So look at this: 2, 4, 6, and so on and so forth. You could observe this particular point here. You could observe this particular point. So what exactly you need to learn about this particular program here in the sense, so range may be taken 3 different types of parameters. Out of these three parameters, final value must be always given by the user. Final value must be always given by the user. And the start value, by default, the start value could be assigned to 0 and the step count will be assigned to 1 by default value. So how it could be looks like here in the sense, your range function will be looks like this. Final value must be given here and the start value will be assigned to 0 and the step count will be assigned to 1 here. By default, it has been assigned something like this while defining your range function here. Your range function will be defined something like this here. If you are supposed to provide the value for start, then 0 will be overwritten, something like this. 0 will be overwritten with 2. And if you provide so step count value at our own, then it has been overwritten or overridden. So on step count with 2 here. Okay. If you are not supposed to provide something like this, default values can be taken. If you are supposed to provide the values, they will be always overwritten here. So let me give you one more very important point to be understand here is so the start value. Okay, whatever the function you may be considered at our own, that particular function could be so taken its definition something like this. Take its definition something like this, and these values, whatever the specific values you have been assigned here. So look at this. This is the default parameter here, and this is second default parameter here. Two default parameters have been taken into consideration here. This is first one, and this is second one here. So here, as and when if you want to assign default parameters or default arguments for a particular function's arguments, then you must be assign the values. You must be assign the values in this direction. In this direction here, you must remember this one. Let us consider a particular function and having so parameter 1 or argument 1 comma argument 2 or parameter 2 comma parameter 3 comma parameter 4 and so on and so forth. Has huge number of parameters will be there with you, for example. And let me assign the default values for parameter 4 and parameter 3 and parameter 2 something like this. You must assign the values something like this in this particular direction. In this particular direction, you have to assign the default parameters here. Unless otherwise, they would not be considered. They would not be considered as so it's a default value. So therefore, it could be provide some error message. So let me give you examples at this moment. So function fn of default parameter p1 will be equal to, for example, p1 will be equal to some value that is 10, followed by comma. So p2, so comma p3. If you are supposed to specify something like this, then it will be provide error message. Okay, a default value or a default parameter follows without a default value. That is the error message which could be provided by the Python. Of course, all other languages also. And for example, fn1, this is fn1, for example, this is fn2. So you may be provide so parameter 1 comma, so parameter 2 will be taken its default value, for example, will be equal to some 20, so followed by comma parameter 3. If you provide something like this, it's also provided, it's also causes to error message. It is not legal, it is also not legal. And for example, fn3 function 3 will be equal function 3 of parameter 1 argument 1 or parameter 1 parameter 2 will be equal to some value, that is some 20 or 10, whatever may be. Parameter 3 will be equal to some 4, whatever the value you are supposed to take into consideration. Now it is okay, because one non default parameter followed by two default parameters. It could be okay here. It could be accepted here. Okay. So this case is not accepted, and this case also not accepted. Let me show you how this could be gets happen by taking one small example. By taking one small example, let me take the example here. The example could be, everybody has some idea regarding to the simple interest. Simple interest in the sense, for example, interest calculation does take in three different types of parameters: principal, followed by rate of RO, rate of interest, followed by time. These are the three parameters which could be generally taken by any interest calculation here. So here, if you want to provide default parameters for rate of interest and time, yes, you could provide and can be calculated at your own. Let me show you by taking so a practical approach here. So look at this. DEF and default parameters will be always taken, always created using only functions. Okay. Interest calculation is my function name, followed by principal, comma, so rate of interest, So will be equal to, let me say 10 percentage. I'm thinking that that is 10.45 percentage. And then time, let me take, it could be, so 12 months. Number of months will be 12 months, that is 1 year. Okay, monthly interest calculation will be taken into consideration. And so interest paid will be equal to how much interest you are supposed to pay here is, so principal into, so ROI, rate of interest, into TIME, so divided by 100, divided by, so I have to put one more open brace here, then it could be gets completed. So rate of interest divided by 100 here. Then obviously you have to return interest paid. That value could be returned to the user. Now, I'd like to consider main program DEF MAIN. So this main program already we have taken regarding to this particular main program. Main program does not take any kind of parameters and does not return any value. You please remember this particular point at this moment. And here you'd like to consider integer. Okay, sorry. Principal P will be equal to, principal P will be equal to, so let me say this is a float value, float of input of, so enter principal value. I have been taken only principal value at this moment, and I don't want to go I don't want to take any rate of interest at my own and the time at my own. Okay, now some value amount. Okay, interest will be equal to, so interest calculation, let me copy this one for a while here. Interest calculation of, I'd like to pass only one parameter, that is P, nothing more than that. Okay, so total amount paid will be equal to, so P plus interest. Okay, then print principal value is, whatever the principal value you have been taken into consideration, that particular value comma P, that is the actual amount which has been borrowed from your friend. And then again print, so interest to be paid, how much interest you are supposed to pay here is, so this is the interest you have to pay for 1 year, that is interest, then followed by total amount, sorry, print total amount to be paid. How much amount totally you are supposed to pay after 1 year is, so total AMOUNT, total amount. So these are the specifications, and finally you have to call main function. Okay, main function has been called here. Let me save this particular program with a particular name, so that is interest calculation. Okay, let me run this particular program for a while, how this could be gets calculated. So look at this, enter principal value. Okay, let me make this particular thing towards okay, then it is very easy to seen by you, since your display unit will be very small enough, so that is why I have been adjusted. Enter principal amount. So I would like to borrow, so 1,000 rupees, some 35 paisa from my friend. Okay, this amount have been taken from my friend here. Then what is the interest you are supposed to pay? So interest to be paid will be 1,254 rupees, and finally, so you are expected to pay, so 2,254 rupees at the end of so 1 year for on 10 point what is the 10.45 rate. At 10.448, so how much amount you are supposed to be paid here is, this is the amount you are supposed to be paid here. So total principal amount you have borrowed will be this one, and this is the interest you are supposed to be paid to your friend. And finally, in addition with the principal and interest, you are supposed to pay this one here. Okay, here my question is, so I have been passed, actually interest calculation has been taken three different types of parameters here. Look at this, three parameters. One is principal, second is rate of interest, and third one is time. So here, if you are supposed to take three parameters for any particular function, but you have been passed only one particular parameter here. That is, principal value has been passed here. So it doesn't show any kind of error. Why? What is the reason behind this to not showing any errors here? Is you have been assigned default values for rate of interest, and you have assigned default value of time also. Okay, so that is the reason why it has not been given any kind of error message. And let me take rate of interest. So R will be, now I'd like to take the input for so float input of enter rate sorry rate of interest. What is the rate of interest you are supposed to give to your friend? You have to enter that one. So now I'd like to take one more parameter, one more extra parameter for this one. That parameter will be, so let me say that is R. Now already you have assigned ROI as 10.45, but you are not interested in terms of 10.45, which is a default value. You are interested to take it's your variable interest, what exactly you are supposed to consider. So that variable interest must be taken as input here. So therefore, so instead of 10.45, whatever the value you have entered here, that will be taken into consideration. Okay, let me execute this one for a while, then you could understand. Now it has been asked, so 1000.35 paisa. This is my principal amount, and the rate of interest is in our program we have given 10.45. Now I'd like to give 5.23%. I have reduced the rate of interest right away from 10.45 to 5.223%. How much amount you are supposed to pay? So 1000 rupees, for 1000 rupees 35 paise on so 5 rupees, sorry, 5.23%, you may be pay 627.81 paisa. Finally you have to pay so 1628.16 paisa to your friend at the end of 12 months. Okay, so this is the story. So here within this particular story, actually the calculation will be taken 10.45 if you are not supposed to submit this one. Now you have been submitted at your own value. So since you have taken your own value, that value has been overwritten of default value here. Default value is 10.45, but this value is 5.23. 5.23 will be overwritten. So that is why this value could not be considered here. Now let me take one more parameter here. That parameter is time. Time will be equal to, it's also be float. Okay, integer actually, it is an integer. So input of enter, so the tenure, enter the tenure. How much tenure you are expected to consider? Here we have been taken 12 months, but we are not interested to take 12 months here. We would like to consider, so we'd like to consider so our own value. Let me take 1035 paise, 1035 paise, followed by interest is 5.23%. But my time will be, I'm not interested to give so 12 months long period to my friend. I'd like to collect this amount by only 6 months. Within 6 months, I'd like to collect from my friend. So look at this. So here, previously, one moment please. I am very sorry, I did not submit this value here. I did not forward this value here. So that is why we got the same output here. So T also be forwarded or so given as parameter to the called area. So now you please run this particular program for a while, then you could understand. So same values could be entered by me at this moment also. So 1000 rupees 35 paise. 35 paise, and then 5.23 only, but it must be done. So in 6 months, look at this. So it has been reduced. Previously it is 627, it is 313. So 13 rupees. Look at this. 1314.25 paise must be paid after 6 months. Okay. Like this, you could consider your default parameters here. Now, I hope that you people would get this particular point at this moment. Now, if I would eliminate default parameter here, for example, if I would eliminate a default parameter here for time, I just eliminate the default parameter, then what could be what could be the specification here? What could be the error which could be provided here is, so let me run this one here. You could see non-default argument follows a default argument. Look at this. This is non-default argument. Principal is non-default argument, followed by default argument, followed by again non-default argument. Okay, non-default argument follows default argument. This is the error message which has been produced. This is the error message which has been produced. Okay, it could not be worked out. For example, if I would consider some will be principal will be 1000 rupees. This is a default parameter, and this is also default parameter, and the time is a non-default parameter. There is no value which has been assigned, so that it is non-default parameter. Then what exactly it could be done here? Let us execute one more time. Are there any errors which will be provided? Let us execute this one more time. Okay, source must be saved. Yes, one more time, the same kind of message will be displayed to you. Syntax error, non-default argument follows by the default argument. Look at this. This is principal is the default parameter, default argument, and the rate of interest also default argument, but time does not default argument. So that is what I have given you a clear instruction. You are expected to assign your default parameters in this direction. You must remember. So first one is P4 must be assigned, P3 must be assigned, P2 must be assigned, then followed by P1. So P4, if you are not supposed to assign P4, as far as this particular example is concerned, P4 is not supposed to be assigned, error message will be, error message will be reduced. You please remember this. Okay, you please remember this particular point here. So this is the error here. Non-default argument has been followed default argument. So that is the point here. So that you must eliminate here. You must eliminate here, and you must also eliminate this one. Of course, you please enter this particular value here. For example, 10 months only. Now it is okay. Now it is okay. So default parameter followed by non-default and non-default. There is no problem for this particular kind of assignment. Let me execute this one for a while. Look at this. Look at this. So 2000 rupees and then 4.56%. Of course, I've been taken this one here. It has been calculated. Okay. So therefore, default parameters will be always taken right to left form. Well, okay, so this is the particular point which we have to remember. In this way, default parameters will be gets operated in any object-oriented programming languages, including C++ and Java. Okay, so as far as Python and C++ and Java, everything will be taken in the same format here. Let me consider one more example for you. It's a very probably. One more example could not be taken. I would like to solve one more example for you, and I would like to forward the same to you through Google Classrooms, and you have to execute the same in our respective area, and then you can solve more examples on default parameters here. Okay. So this is what about default parameters. Default parameters must be always assign the default values right away from right to left form. It must be always remembered by you. This must be always remembered by you. So this is the way you have to assign default values for arguments of a particular function. If you are not supposed to follow this one, even it could not be executed. It may causes some error message. you please remember this particular point here. This point is very, very important, and this point is very crucial also. Okay. So this is what today's class, and we'll meet by tomorrow. So I'll give you the time in the morning itself. Okay. Thank you. Wait for a while. I would like to consider collect your yeah, attendance has taken. Sorry. Yes, attendance has taken. Thank you for